Welcome to the Retirement Roadmap by SHP Financial, a podcast empowering today's retirees and pre-retirees to make well-informed financial decisions that will help you spend more time living and dreaming than worrying and wondering. Join me, Matthew Peck, along with my co-hosts, Derek Gregoire and Keith Ellis, as we share actionable financial strategies and insights, as well as interview top thought leaders in the world of finance, accounting, and estate planning. This is all aimed at preparing you for the retirement you've always dreamed of. Our high-quality holistic planning process has helped thousands of families retire and create what we like to call the ripple effect. The Retirement Roadmap is your guide to financial freedom. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.
Although we've had some recent volatility over the last couple of years, the last decade has been pretty rosy for stock markets, to say the least. We had periods a few years ago, we saw low inflation, lower taxes, low interest rates, and it made it a great environment for public markets and the economy to flourish. At this point, it's been a little bit of a different story, I'd say, and although a recession may have you worried, it's important to remember, although we're coming off a historic bull market run over many years, we've seen bear markets before, and we've made it through retirement, throughout recessions and inflationary periods, and obviously I think we can get through this one as well. So I'm Derek Gregoire, joined by Matthew Peck as always, and welcome to the SHP Retirement Roadmap podcast. And I think today, Matt, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the history of we won't get too political, but how politics and different eras and finances kind of relate to each other. So people that are in or nearing retirement, and they've probably weathered recessions and inflation before, but maybe they don't remember it. So,
well, and I think that's what it is, Derek. It's like, I think everyone, me included, you need historical perspective. You need to sort of put it into perspective when it comes to, okay, all right, this is what we're going through right now. And if, by no means are we predicting the future, and history can't predict the future, but there's always parallels, there's always similarities. And then most importantly, as you were mentioning, we have made it through past recession periods, past inflationary periods, and gives you hope, and as you should have, that we'll get through this one as well.
Well, that's the thing, is everyone thinks of the now and the today, and it's like, okay, that seems a little bit, it can be frightening when, things are costing so much more, and getting your gas and groceries, everything costs so much more. But
well, I was going to say, that's why I always joke around about how history is always nice because you know how it ends. Yeah. It's like reading a book. You always learn something more about, oh my goodness, I didn't realize this happened, or this meeting happened, or sometimes all the little coincidences that happened were, meetings that maybe didn't happen that could have made a big difference. But it's always very reassuring because you know how the story ends. You know how we got through the Carter years. You know how the dot-com bubble burst in that recovery. But when you're living in the present, you don't know how the story ends.
Exactly.
And so there's always that anxiety that will come with that.
So speaking of those two situations, because those, when you look at the here and now, right? Everyone, how many times have you heard people say, "Oh, this is going to be different"? This time it's different. Well, we look historically, you brought up a few different downturns that we've all got through, or different situations, and people were obviously a lot younger during these situations, but I bet they remember them from their portfolio. We had the 1970s Carter era inflation, and we had the dot-com bubble. Those are two. We haven't even got to the 2008 yet, but those are two big kind of situations in the financial history that we saw. We went through as a country, and we got through them.
Well, and I think we wanted to begin with the Carter era inflation because that was by far the most, I'd say the most consistent or the most common go-to when people said, okay, when was the last time that we had this type of inflation and this type of Federal Reserve, I might add too, because over the past, as you were saying during the introduction, we've had low interest rates for 20, 30, now 40 years. And suddenly, okay, we had low interest rates, and then we had relatively low inflation. And so, okay, when was the last time that we had inflation that was basically out of control, and then the Fed had to take direct, sometimes painful action to fix it? And so everyone went back to, as you should have, the Carter era inflation and what Chairman Volcker did to fix it. And you talk about people's memories. I love talking to our clients and just asking them the question, what interest rate did you pay on your first mortgage? And they talk in terms of 12%, 10% CDs were up in that range.
No, that's the thing is we're in our 20th year of SHP Financial. Obviously, Carter was well before that.
Yeah, right.
But it's so funny because we have so many clients talk that I feel like I know that era just from growing up in the business, and clients saying, "Oh, you have no idea. My mortgage was 12% and 15%, but our CDs were paying 13, 14% in the bank." And I used to always say, well, I guess if you had your house paid off and a lot of money in the bank, you probably did okay. But then they said, no, but everything costs so much more as well.
Right.
So that era was obviously a tricky one. But like everything else as a country, we've got through that and successfully over time.
Well, and I think too, I mean, in back to sort of like the Federal Reserve and the parallels to that time. I mean, one thing is that they realize, like the Federal Reserve, especially now, realizes that when inflation does occur and it's that rampant, it affects us all. It affects your grandparents that are living on a fixed income, and it affects people that are just starting out. It affects, as you said, when people are just getting food. I mean, it is such a painful force in people's lives that they're losing money. Like we talk about how people lose money safely if they have money in the checking and savings account, because you're legitimately losing money. I mean, I can't, even today, I mean, forget about Carter years, I can't go to a grocery store without dropping at least $200. And that's like a half a week of food. I mean,
well, how about like breakfast? I go to breakfast, I feel like I'd go with my family and 2 boys and us 2, and it'd be like $31. Now it's like $100. I
mean, and if you're on minimum wage, or if you're just sort of getting by, I mean, yeah, your income is not keeping up with that. Correct. So the Federal Reserve will take whatever action they deem necessary to get that under control. And they know that once inflation is beat for a little bit at least, then okay, things can kind of get back to a little bit of normal. But I share all that because it just says like, hey, we got through some pretty bad inflation in the past, and that's, it's 40 years, but still, it's sort of recent history in the big scheme of things. We got through that in the past. People still have living memory of it, And I think the other thing too, I get a kick out of that era too, which thankfully did not happen here, is just the lines at the gas station. I mean, I've seen images of that. I've outside of like hurricanes, thankfully, I have not seen any lines out at gas stations. But all those things that will stick with you.
Well, the next thing I remember was actually have a much more clear memory on this one is the .com bubble. And I'm not sure if it was even labeled that at that point, but I was interning for a large financial company at that point, doing research. And I remember being like, clients were calling this big firm saying like, which is a whole other story of why we built the company that we did. This company, in my opinion, I won't even throw them under the bus, but one of these huge institutions. And once the market went down, the clients didn't have almost like a plan for the market to go down. It was almost all the plan were assuming the market always goes up and that's it. People that retired in 2000 during the .com bubble that didn't have a plan, that pulled money out of their portfolio, it was devastating. Even though it eventually recovered 7 years later or so, if you were pulling money out those first 3 years and the market went down 3 years in a row, that's devastating to a long-term plan. Because think about it. Let's say that you had $1 million, you were in the S&P. Let's say you're pulling out $50,000 a year, right? So that's only 5%. You think, oh, I should be fine.
Right.
That's $150,000 in 3 years. The market goes down 50. So now you're at like 400 something thousand. You're 3 years into retirement, and guess what? You still need 50,000, which is now 12% of your portfolio. That it's almost game over. It takes a heroic recovery to overcome that, and so that's separate story, but it's so important to have a plan.
No, but two things I want to pick up on. First, just in regards to like kind of what's in our DNA, and so not to sort of narrow and focus back on SHP, but that by far is in our DNA. Derek, myself, Keith, we all graduated 2000, 2001, and we graduated right in the middle of this .com bubble, the 9/11 attacks, and to talk about, I mean, as you said, about 7 years. I mean, the S&P 500 dropped 50% during this time.
The NASDAQ was worse.
Right, the NASDAQ was worse. But back to that idea, right? 50% down, 7 years to recover. And if you compare what we're going through now, I mean, I forget the most max down was 20 or 25%. I wish I had that exact number.
Nasdaq a little more, but S&P, yeah.
S&P,
25 or so.
Right, just focusing strictly on the S&P. But then technically, I mean, obviously it moves on a daily basis, but we haven't recovered all the way, but we're a lion's share of the way there in less than a year or 2 years, whatever it may, whatever it may end up being. But 7 years to recover, right? And 50% down?
If you're pulling money out, it might never recover.
Oh, right.
It probably never recovered.
Well, that's what I mean, too. And we'll certainly talk about the 2008 situation in a moment, but talk about, again, how that's part of SHP's DNA is because when we were young and starting this business, we saw people that went through that were withdrawing money during these types of market environment. And I think people forget that. We have a short-term memory when it comes to the markets and whatnot. I mean, even COVID, we sort of have a short-term memory. I mean, COVID dropped 30% in a month. Like, how scary was that? And it's like, okay, but I remember what happened afterwards.
Well,
I was going to say, sorry to interrupt, but we remember clients and people going through the dot-com bubble while they're trying to retire, and that's why we sort of try to build our business differently and having a plan.
Yeah, I think the main thing too, as we're going to go through a bunch more stats here and so forth, but as you're listening, we always try to provide some useful information to know, are you prepared for retirement? Do you have a rock solid plan in place? Our clients listening know that we've done a lot of this to prepare them for we always say we hope for the best but plan for the worst. If you wanted to kind of see where you are, we have a really cool quiz. It's called shpquiz.com, or that's where the website is. You can take a quiz. It takes five minutes maybe, but it'll kind of give you an idea of what holes you might have in your retirement plan. Or another good useful guide is to go to shpguides.com, plural, shpguides.com. And we have a really good white paper, pamphlet, whatever you want to call it. What do you call those things?
White paper is good. Brochure.
Brochure. There you go. On the 5 worlds of that we think everyone should have for retirement planning. So shpguides.com or shpquiz.com, just to get some help. So Matt, we're looking at those two situations. I remember, by the way, in 2001, when I was working for this company, I was still in college, my last semester, and I remember after the 9/11 attacks, the .com, we had so much going on. A woman called, and the advisor that I was working with basically was trying to tell me, like, if anyone calls, I'm not here. He didn't want to. He really didn't want to deal with people, and it was kind of unfortunate. So this woman called, and she's like, "I know, so and so's not taking calls, but my husband just retired a year ago, and I forget the exact verbiage, but it was like, we lost half of our money in a year or two. What do we do from here?" And I remember, like, what if that was like my mom? What if that was like a family? What if that was so that's hence how we started our company, is to make sure we plan for all variables from income, investments, taxes, healthcare, legacy, putting that under one plan that's reviewed all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, and talk about how important that was, because as you were saying about hypothetically at $1 million in 2001, and then you're withdrawing. I mean, I know it's as a one-off example of it, but if someone is sort of invested in the market and they are that close to retirement, clearly they didn't have a plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I know we're talking about someone that's hypothetical, but it just shows the importance of making sure that your investment plan matches your income plan, which is obviously your retirement time horizon, and obviously taxes and during the different withdrawals and distributions. I mean, quick anecdote, I have a client of mine who will be celebrating her second marriage very soon for a second wedding. And, they needed only about $10,000, whatever it may be, to help pay for the costs. But the whole idea was that we were balancing the amount of money that was in cash with how much the markets had performed, like what portfolio, if any, had done the more conservative or moderate and whatnot, but then also like the tax status of each of the assets, right? So it was a little bit convoluted, or it seems kind of convoluted, but at the end of the day, we sort of raised cash from the more aggressive portfolio because it's done well for this particular year. but then we made sure that we used some of the cash here.
Yep.
But then also it was a half and half in regards to distributions from IRA and after-tax dollars.
So
right?
yeah, it's a lot of things to consider just for a small, not small, but a small withdrawal.
That's exactly what
overall.
I'm saying. I mean, here's taxes, what the market's doing, cash positions, all for a $10,000 withdrawal, right?
Well, that's the idea of that's the importance of having a plan. It's funny because just I've seen personally, I'm sure you have, a lot of our advisors have seen clients coming in and let's say they saved $1.5 million and they're like in great position. And I feel like we're like saving them because their risk is so high. We're like, oh, I'm so glad you came in now.
Yep.
Because if it came in, it was too late. A lot of people listening might be okay right now, but they're one bad market away from not being okay, where it could be avoided if you plan properly.
No, and honestly, this a referral, great family of mine up at the North Shore. They referred me to this family, and she is probably, so this is the husband and wife, and she is about 62, 63 years old. Same idea. Lion's share of their assets are in a 401k. Roughly over $1 million, and it was 95% stock.
Wow.
And she was, again, 62, 63. And
she's getting close to retire.
Right, and it was great because as we're having our conversations, and I love our conversation, I love meeting new people that, whether it's through a referral or through the podcast or whatnot, but then it's just so comical when it's like, wow, this is the person that we sometimes talk about who you don't want to be.
You.
Right. and Sheila, please forgive me. But the whole idea is that, and she knew too. I mean, we were talking about it, and so she was well aware. It's like, this is probably a little too aggressive for where I am right now. I'm like, well, hey, you're working, it's okay, but it gives you the idea that it absolutely happens.
Yeah, oh yeah.
People life happens. I mean, I think that she's talking about a wedding. I think they were going to a wedding soon. I mean, they had and they celebrated their first granddaughter this same year. So I would rather have people focusing on their their granddaughter and their son getting married or whatever that may be. And so I wouldn't say like it slipped by the goalie, but she just said, I just haven't got to it yet.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing. So the goal is for a good advisor to take that off their plates. And
right.
That's what we do. So we had the Great Recession of 2008. I think that's more fresh in everyone's mind. There was different factors there with the housing market, and we had a lot of just a whole different situation than we have right now. But that, again, even that, as bad as in the middle of that, imagine of how bad things looked. Which,
right.
It was painful. Everything was going, like banks were failing. It was mayhem. Companies were just...
And it's just scary, too. All of those sessions are just so scary when you're looking at your statements and you're just seeing them fall again and again. And as you were saying, too, you hit on a great point where the reasons are different, right? So if you talk about the dot-com bubble, I mean, these companies were just getting way out of hand, and the prices were just way too high.
Yep.
And then obviously they had to come back. Then it was recession. Then it was 9/11, right? Then you have 08. 08 was just rampant, giving out credit and lending to people that really should not have been, not have been borrowing at all. And some of the prime mortgages and subprime mortgages. I mean, they were just
bundling everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone could get a mortgage if you had made $10 or $1 million. You could
with no money down.
Yeah.
So it literally
can't imagine that being a problem.
Yeah, right. It's like, let's see, I'm no money down, and I'm living in a home that's underwater, or that's literally I owe more than the home is worth. Yeah, here are the keys. I'm walking away.
I make $50,000 a year, and the home's $2 million.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But point being is that the reasons will always be, there's a combination, there's similarities and there's parallels, like I was talking about. But at the same point, when they all add up together, it does mean difficult times for the markets. So the reasons might change, but what doesn't change, though, as we were talking about, is the importance of having a plan and knowing that all these, it's almost like a storm, right? All these conditions are all going to come together. A storm, and some storms are worse than others, and then the blue skies come out again. But if you don't have a plan for those storms and for the length of those storms,
or if you panic during the storm. So that's the whole thing, Matt, is like we've seen these roadblocks before. We've gotten through them. Obviously, SHP's been doing it for 20 years. But, there's always international political conflict. There's bad banking practices. The list goes on and on. But having a professional by your side who knows how to navigate these tough times, who's gone through them before, it's obviously an invaluable asset for retirement planning. I mean, that's literally what we do for our clients. And unfortunately, we deal with I've had a couple deaths, unfortunately, in the last month or so, and it's just awful. But the one at least I feel good about, and these families know that their financial affairs are taken care of during that. Doesn't even compare anything to what they're going through, but at least it's one thing off the table. And like I had a recent client who passed away, and he did everything. He would handle the finances. He did all the accounting. He was an accountant, awesome guy. And he wanted to make sure his wife was taken care of. And that he had a company that he trusted that could see out his wishes for his family. And so now at least she has met. That's the other thing. People sometimes, they think they can do it themselves, but if the wife or the husband or whatever spouse does the planning, does the financial affairs, if they pass away and the other spouse that doesn't do them, they're kind of thrown to the wolves, and you might get a bad experience. You might get some just salesman looking to pull something by. You have to be
while you're grieving, I might add.
Exactly. So I would say, while there's a few factors to consider, essentially we've seen what it's like to go through a recession, and we've talked about it. I take it, we should, Matt, talk about some of the steps retirees or soon to be retirees should be doing to protect themselves. And I think most people think is like, I'd say IRAs and 401ks is that hot topic because that's where most of the assets are.
Well, and I think too, to go back and to kind of use some of the more official terms. So Derek at the beginning was mentioning of, withdrawing money during bad times. So technically, obviously you and I talk about it, but just so all of our listeners know, that's what's called sequence of return risk.
Yep.
Okay. Again,
it's an important thing to know.
Right. So sequence of returns, like think of it like, what did I get this year versus next year versus the following year? Because you can't really control that. And we were talking about 2000, 2001. I mean, it was close to 2 to 3 years of the markets being down, 2 to 3 years. So before eventually the recovery begins. So if you plan on taking distributions soon or are currently taking them, withdrawing from a declining portfolio can slash its lifespan.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge. So that's what you were saying earlier. Over a long period of time, a portfolio might average 5%. Or 10% or 7%, but you want if it's averaging 7% and I have $1 million and I've only pulled 5% out and it's average 7, how come I have less money?
Right.
Well, that's sequence of returns. If the returns are negative, especially early on in your retirement, like we mentioned earlier, during 2000 to 2002, that would have been a horrible year to retire. In terms of withdrawals. So you have to be careful because if you don't have your assets set up properly for distribution, remember, accumulation versus distribution, completely different phases of life. So it's important to make sure your IRA, if you have IRAs, if you have 401ks, even if you have non-IRAs, make sure the allocation's proper at this point. That's a little bit hedged against the market. That takes into account inflation and anything else that can affect the longevity of your portfolio.
Well, and the other thing I was going to add, just to the sequence of returns risk, before we talk about all the steps that people can take, one of the little math problems that really help emphasize that is because if you lose 10%, it's not 10, and if you gain 10%, you're still not equal. Yes. I mean, you literally need to get 15% in order to make over to make it a 10%. Or think of this: we have $100,000, you lose 10%. Okay, now you're down to 90. But if you earn 10%, you're only back up to 99,000.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the whole idea: is the fact that whatever you lose, if you're not balancing for sequence of returns risk or planning for it, whatever you might lose in that given year, you're going to need more for it to recover while you're still making distributions or potentially making distributions, especially if you're in retirement. So that math, I think, is a great thing to keep in mind when you say, hey, I can't afford to lose, let's say 10% because now I need 12% to get back. That means you can take on excess risk. It's a spiral you don't want to be in,
especially if you're pulling money out at the same time.
Exactly.
And so the other thing we want to talk about, let's say you have 401ks or IRAs. One thing is if your 401ks at work, but you're over 59 and a half, it might be an opportunity to roll to an IRA because you might have more options more fund selection, more options for investments inside an IRA compared to a 401k. And the other thing too, from a tax standpoint, if you have IRAs and 401ks, the other thing to look at, obviously each person, each situation, each family is different, but Roth conversions. We talked about that before, but that's another way to hedge taxes because we haven't even gone down that road, but taxes and the political climate around taxes could affect your portfolio big time because if you have $1 million, that's not really $1 million because the government right now might own 37%.
Yep.
And in 2 years, they might say we own 45%. So it's not really your money. It's partly yours, partly the government's.
And just talk, I can't even stress the importance of tax planning. I know, as you said, we won't go too far. We're talking more general and more historical than, too far down the historical rabbit hole. But just think about, and I was in the example of my client's wedding. I mean, even a normal distribution, even a normal IRA or 401k distribution, our default is probably 20% withholding, right? 15% for Fed and 5% for state, for the state of Massachusetts, or for folks that were listening in Massachusetts. That's 20%. So, I mean, think about that. Even if you take the $1 million, and that's even
20% is low.
Right, exactly. So, okay, you have $1 million. No, you got $800,000, and that's probably being generous as to how much you have. $200,000 of that $1 million, and as I said, I'm probably being generous with that, is you only have $800,000. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Not only that, when you call and say I need 50 for a new car, we have to give you 70. Mm-hmm. So we have to send 15 to the government, 5 to Mass, or whatever obviously I'm not using exact terms, but
right.
Where if you have a Roth IRA, if you need 50, it's just 50. So the planning, and then by the way, if you have RMDs, let's say you have required minimum distributions and you have pretty good income and other miscellaneous income, now you also start flirting with Medicare premium adjustments. So I don't want to scare everyone and confuse everyone. The most important thing here is just that's where the planning comes in. There's so many factors, like when you take Social Security has an impact on taxes, has an impact on your withdrawals, has an impact potentially on Medicare premiums. All these things are intertwined.
And the last thing I would add, just the fact that all these things then change. You had the Secure Act, the initial one, then you had the Secure Act 2.0. You mentioned about how the taxes will change in the future. They're already set to change, after 2025 with one of the sunsetting. So not only do these things, yes, history, kind of go back to history, right? Not only do you learn from them, and yes, there are parallels and there are similarities, but you also have to be looking to the future, looking to what is coming down the road, both for you personally in your own unique situation, as well as what's happening, in the globe and in the economy and in Washington D.C. So this is what the planning is. You look backwards to learn, but you look forward to prepare.
Good call, Matt. And I think the main thing too, as we kind of close this conversation, is you have we've said it before. Do you have a portfolio or a plan, right? A portfolio is just a pile of investments. It's important. I don't want to undermine it because it's huge. It's a big part of what we do. But I think the difference way we tried to build out our team here over the last 20 years is we have a full team, CFAs, so forth, that handle the investments and all that one piece. We have a different team that handles the planning and the planning aspects. We have a team of CPAs and attorneys who help on the estate tax questions and planning around state taxes and just taxes in general that we go back and forth with on Roth conversion, tax loss harvesting strategies. So if you just have a portfolio and you have no other plan, healthcare, I didn't even talk about healthcare. That's what we think about, having a comprehensive plan. So especially now, right? No one knows what the market's going to do. I can't tell you that. Matt can't tell you. We're pretty confident over the long run. But retirement or upcoming retirement isn't a good time to deal with uncertainty. There's no real simple solution or piece of advice that applies to every single person when it comes to retirement planning, unfortunately. The important thing is, as I mentioned 100 times, have a comprehensive plan that's built to protect against these market risks and also tailored for your specific situation and goals. So think about it. You've worked hard your entire life, saved some money, and a big part of your nest egg is probably rolled up into an IRA, 401k, or in the same strategy. You might be in the same strategy for investment-wise as you had when you were younger. But things can change. And right now, the financial markets are changing in ways that they haven't in a while. We've seen this the last couple of years. At times, the market had experienced unprecedented gains. But during downturns, you could be left hoping for a speedy correction, just trying to get back on track where things were, but hoping is not a strategy. We know that. I remember 2008, it was a drop of over 40%. So when it comes to your retirement, you definitely don't want to play around with the income you're depending on, right? And that's where our teams comes to work every day with one thing in mind. How do we help honest, hardworking people live the retirement that you've been dreaming of, that you've tried to build, that you've worked so hard to get to? And it usually involves the same things we're talking about today, trying to minimize risk and protect your retirement income that you're depending on, which looks at all kinds of taxes, tax strategies, income strategies, asset allocation strategies, risk tolerance. There's so much that goes into it. So I think our team, there's a couple of different ways that we can help. One of the ways is basically just going to our website, which is shpfinancial.com. There's a ton of resources there. You can sign up for a complimentary consultation there. But if you just want to get some basic information just to get started on this journey and don't want a consultation, you can go to shpquiz.com and take a retirement quiz to see where you stand at this point. Or you can also go to shpguides.com to download our recent white paper on the 5 most important aspects we think you need from a planning standpoint to have in your retirement. So shpfinancial.com is the website, SHP Guides for the white paper, and shpquiz.com to take a retirement quiz. So a lot of good information, Matt. Thanks for all the info.
Wouldn't miss it, my friend.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Roadmap podcast by SHP Financial. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you've liked what you heard, please share the show. Create your own little ripples so we can help even more people with their retirement goals. If you want access to all past interviews, including notes, resources, and exclusive content from SHP Financial, visit shpfinancial.com/podcast. Thanks again for joining us on the Retirement Roadmap podcast. And for all the attorneys out there and disclaimers and disclosures, I'm just going to put on my super serious voice and add our own. No statements made during the Retirement Roadmap podcast shall constitute tax, legal, or accounting advice. You should consult your own legal or tax professional on any such matters. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Our investment advisory services are offered through SHP Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance sales are offered through SHP Financial, LLC. Our advisors and insurance reps may offer clients advice and/or products from each entity. No client is under any obligation to purchase any insurance product.